Grizzly bears are highly intelligent animals, with some wildlife biologists comparing their problem-solving skills to those of great apes. They also have remarkable memories. However, this intelligence can sometimes pose a danger to humans, as one grizzly used a playing dead tactic to kill nearly a dozen people. How did this happen? Join us as we uncover the incredible story and the surprising events that led to this deadly encounter. In September 2020, 10 seasoned hikers embarked on an ambitious expedition through the dense, rugged forests near Siberia's Altai Mountains. Known for its pristine wilderness and unpredictable dangers, the Altai Range was both awe-inspiring and perilous, home to formidable wildlife, including the legendary Russian grizzly bear. Among the group were Ivan and Dmitry Petrov, brothers in their early 30s, eager to escape the monotony of city life and experience the raw, untamed landscape. They had trained for months and prepared for the harsh conditions, but nothing could have prepared them for the unfolding horror. The morning was crisp, the sky pale blue, and the dense pine forest stretched endlessly, interrupted only by the occasional frozen stream. The hikers moved in single file along a narrow, winding trail. The air was thick with anticipation, and each step took them deeper into the wild heart of Siberia. Despite their excitement, there was an undercurrent of unease. The forest was eerily quiet, and the presence of predators like the Russian grizzly, a powerful and dangerous creature, was never far from their thoughts. As they trekked deeper into the woods, the trail narrowed further, and the dense canopy overhead blocked much of the sunlight. The forest floor was covered in a thick layer of frost, crunched under their boots with each step. Then they encountered something that would stop them dead in their tracks. Lying across the trail was a massive, motionless form. At first it seemed like just another fallen tree, but as they got closer, the unmistakable shape of a grizzly bear became apparent. Its fur was patchy, its body gaunt, and its ribs were visible beneath the coarse coat. The bear appeared lifeless, its head tilted unnaturally to one side, its eyes closed. The hikers hesitated, uncertain of what to do. Some wanted to turn back immediately, but others, driven by curiosity, urged caution and suggested they investigate further. Ivan, always the more daring of the brothers, decided to step closer, the others reluctantly following his lead. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual sounds of wildlife stilled in the presence of this enormous creature. Without warning, the bear's eyes snapped open, and with a deafening roar, it surged to life. The sound reverberated through the trees, shaking the very air. The massive bear lunged toward them with terrifying speed, its claws slashing through the air like a lethal weapon. Its roar echoed across the forest, shaking the ground beneath them as it moved with predatory ferocity, its emaciated form now a deadly force of nature. The group's initial shock quickly turned to chaos. The first hiker, closest to the bear, was struck by a swipe of the creature's massive paw, sending them crashing to the ground, blood spraying from the savage wound. Before anyone could react, the bear's jaws closed around the next victim, tearing them apart in seconds. Ivan and Dmitry watched in horror as two more hikers fell victim to the bear's lethal onslaught, their screams cutting through the trees before being abruptly silenced. Now gripped by sheer panic, the remaining hikers scattered in every direction. Desperate to protect his brother, Ivan grabbed Dmitry's arm and pulled him away, urging him to run. The forest exploded into a cacophony of noise, branches snapping, leaves rustling as they bolted through the undergrowth. Fueled by rage and hunger, the bear gave chase, its powerful legs thundering across the forest floor. Ivan dared not look back, though the sounds of the bear's pursuit grew louder with every passing second. The growls and roars of the bear echoed in their ears as they ran, and Ivan could hear the sickening crunch of bones as the beast tore into another hiker, their desperate cries quickly swallowed by the forest. In the distance, another hiker's screams faded into the woods, dragged away by the bear. The brothers pushed themselves beyond exhaustion, their bodies screaming for rest, but they dared not stop. They tore through the trees, leaping over fallen logs, their hearts pounding as they fought to escape the nightmare. They thought they might have lost the bear when they stumbled into a small clearing, the sounds of pursuit suddenly dissipating. But their respite was fleeting. The forest around them grew unnervingly still, too still, and they crouched low in a thicket, trembling from the terror that still gripped them. Hours passed in the cold, with the brothers hiding in the brush, afraid to move. 6 of the 10 hikers were already dead, and 2 more had been dragged away by the bear, leaving only Ivan and Dmitri to face the grim reality of their situation. The temperature continued to drop as nightfall descended, the Siberian cold creeping into their bones. They knew they couldn't remain hidden for long. The bear could return at any moment. With little choice, they decided to risk moving again, hoping to find their bearings and escape the forest. They used a flashlight to guide their way, its flickering beam cutting through the darkness as they retraced their steps. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves put their nerves on edge, but the forest had other plans. As they moved deeper into the woods, it became clear that the bear had not lost its scent. They heard the heavy thud of its paws in the distance, the sound drawing nearer each passing moment. Ivan and Dmitri's hopes of escaping grew more desperate. They were lost and weak, and their survival chances grew slimmer with every breath they took. The flashlight beam trembled in Ivan's hand as they tried to navigate, and an overwhelming sense of dread pushed them forward. At that moment, the bear struck again. From the shadows, it charged at them with terrifying speed. Ivan turned to shield Dmitri, but it was too late. The bear's claws raked across Ivan's side, and before Dmitri could react, the beast was upon him too. It tore into them with brutal efficiency, its claws raking through flesh, its powerful jaws closing around their limbs. They were helpless against the onslaught. The forest swallowed the sounds of the brothers' screams, their lives extinguished in an instant. The bear, its hunger sated for the moment, dragged their broken bodies into the darkness. When rescuers finally arrived, they found nothing but the blood-soaked ground, scattered remnants of clothing, and the unmistakable scent of death. The search continued for days, and it soon became clear that the bear responsible for the carnage was no ordinary grizzly. This rogue predator had learned to use cunning, feigning death to lure hikers in close. Its violence, driven by hunger and desperation, had turned it into a brutal killing machine. The bear was eventually tracked down and killed by a team of hunters, but the damage had already been done. The loss of Ivan and Dmitri, along with their friends, left an indelible mark on the survivors in the community. The attack ignited fierce debates about human-wildlife conflict, the dangers of encroaching on wildlife territories, and the consequences of a rapidly changing environment. For the family and friends of the hikers, especially Ivan and Dmitri's loved ones, the tragedy became a chilling reminder of the raw, unforgiving power of nature. In February 2022, Montana's Bob Marshall Wilderness lay draped in a pristine blanket of snow. The vast, rugged expanse stretched untouched for miles, its tranquility broken only by the distant howl of wind through towering pines. Few dared to venture into this unforgiving landscape in winter, when the cold was unrelenting and the wildlife retreated to the depths of survival. Yet Jack Hayes and Tom Walker, seasoned snowmobilers and thrill-seekers, were undeterred by the isolation or the biting winds that cut through the towering evergreens. They dismissed warnings from locals about the dangers of winter exploration and the hibernating grizzlies beneath the snow. To them, it was just another adventure, another claim to boldness. With their snowmobiles humming like restless predators, they carved through the pristine snowfields, leaving trails of churned frost in their wake. The world seemed muted in the vast wilderness. The only sounds were the distant rustling of wind and the occasional crack of ice. As they pushed deeper into the wilderness, adrenaline coursed through their veins, a potent mixture of defiance and exhilaration. The warnings about grizzlies had been clear. Bears, hibernating in dens concealed beneath thick layers of snow, were to be left undisturbed at all costs. A grizzly roused from its winter slumber could be lethal, its survival instincts honed to a razor's edge by months of fasting and vulnerability. But Jack and Tom, caught up in the thrill of exploration, paid little mind. Their snowmobiles tore across a steep ridge, the snow beneath them groaning under the weight of their machines. Suddenly there was a sharp crack, an unnatural sound that froze the air around them. Jack's snowmobile dropped slightly, its treads sinking deeper into the snow. Before either could react, the ground collapsed in a spray of ice and powder. Beneath the crumbled snow lay a hollowed den, a sanctuary meant to shield its occupant from the world above. But now the sanctuary had been destroyed, and a force of nature emerged from its depths, an enraged grizzly bear. Its hulking form rose from the shadows of the collapsed den, patches of snow clinging to its matted fur. Its small, dark eyes glinted with fury, the low rumble of its growl slicing through the frozen air. Jack barely had time to react before the bear lunged, its immense weight slamming into him like an avalanche. The attack was ferocious, primal, a blur of claws, teeth, and the guttural roar of the enraged animal. Jack's snowmobile tipped over as he was thrown into the snow, his arm catching the brunt of the bear's swiping claws. Pain erupted through him, hot and blinding. Blood stained the pristine white snow as he struggled beneath the sheer power of the beast. Gripped by terror, Tom abandoned his snowmobile and bolted into the forest. The bear, sensing movement, turned its attention to the fleeing figure. It roared, its breath clouding in the cold air, before charging after Tom with alarming speed. Tom ran mindlessly, his boots sinking deep into the snow, each step a Herculean effort. Branches clawed at his face, the cold air burning his lungs with every ragged breath. He dared not look back, though the bear's snarls grew closer with each passing second. His only thought was an escape, a desperate flight through an endless maze of trees and snow. The chase felt endless. His legs screamed for relief as exhaustion and panic overtook him. By some twist of luck, Tom stumbled upon a narrow ravine. He slid down its icy slope, the sharp descent tearing at his clothes but putting distance between him and the pursuing bear. For hours he wandered, the adrenaline of the chase giving way to the creeping realization that he was lost. His gloves were damp from the snow. His fingers were growing numb and unresponsive. The cold seeped into his bones, and the sun sank lower in the sky, casting the wilderness into a dim, shadowy twilight. Meanwhile, Jack lay in the snow, his breath shallow, his body trembling with shock and pain. Blood seeped from deep gashes in his arm and torso, staining the snow a vivid red. The bear had long since abandoned him, its wrath redirected toward Tom, but the damage was done. He struggled to move, every slight shift sending waves of pain through his body. Yet he clung to life, his will to survive a flickering flame against the encroaching darkness. By the time rescuers found Jack 2 days later, his ordeal had left him on the brink of death. Hypothermia had set in, and his injuries were severe, but he was alive, a grim testament to his resilience. His survival came at a cost, however. The bear's attack had left him with permanent scars, both physical and psychological. His right arm, shredded by claws, was left partially immobile, and he would carry the memory of that day in every uneasy step into the wild. Tom's fate was far grimmer. When search teams finally located his body, it was huddled beneath the shelter of a fallen tree, his face pale and his hands blackened from frostbite. He had evaded the bear, but the wilderness had claimed him in the end. Cold, exhaustion, and disorientation had proven insurmountable, and he had succumbed to the elements alone and far from help. The tragedy rippled through the local community and beyond, sparking debates about backcountry safety and respect for wildlife. Wildlife experts explained that the grizzly's aggression directly resulted from disrupted hibernation. Bears relied on undisturbed rest to survive the harsh winter, and being startled awake triggered an instinctual heightened aggression born of fear and desperation. The story of Jack and Tom became a cautionary tale, a grim reminder of the wilderness's unforgiving nature. Conservationists and outdoor groups called for stricter regulations on winter activities in sensitive habitats, emphasizing the need to protect wildlife during their most vulnerable months. For Jack, the lessons of that February day were seared into his memory. The wilderness was not merely a playground for human thrill seekers, but a delicate ecosystem that demanded respect. In September 2017, Mark Evans, a seasoned wildlife photographer known for his breathtaking captures of nature's raw beauty, embarked on an ambitious journey to a national park in the Alaska Range's central area. The crisp autumn air and vibrant foliage surrounding the Brooks River made it the perfect setting to document the annual salmon run. This natural spectacle drew grizzly bears from far and wide, providing them with the sustenance they needed to survive the harsh Alaskan winter. For Mark, it was a dream assignment that promised to be both challenging and rewarding. Mark had spent years honing his craft and had developed a deep respect for the wild. His portfolio was filled with close-up shots of predators in action, wolves prowling under a full moon, eagles diving into icy waters, and even tigers in the dense jungles of India. However, the Alaskan grizzly bear, the apex predator of North America, remained a glaring omission. The Brooks River, renowned for its high concentration of bears during salmon season, was the ideal place to change that. With his high-end DSLR, telephoto lenses, and an array of camping gear, Mark set out to capture the elusive images that had eluded him for years. The first few days were idyllic. Mark maintained a respectful distance from the bears, often using his long lens to observe their behavior without intruding. He documented their fishing techniques, territorial squabbles, and even tender moments between mothers and cubs. Mark's camp was located a safe distance from the riverbank, tucked into the dense brush where he believed he could remain undetected by the wildlife. He adhered to the park's guidelines, keeping food sealed, avoiding loud noises, and steering clear of known bear trails. By the fourth day, Mark had accumulated hundreds of stunning photographs, but he wanted more. A definitive shot of a grizzly in the throes of the salmon hunt, framed by the shimmering waters of the Brooks River. Early that morning, he spotted a colossal male bear, its fur damp and glistening as it feasted on a pile of freshly caught salmon. The bear was massive, likely weighing close to 1,200 pounds, with a hump of muscle over its shoulders and claws that curved like scythes. This was the image Mark had been waiting for. He set up his tripod on a ridge that provided a clear view of the river below. From his vantage point, he estimated that he was at least 200 yards away, well beyond the park's recommended distance of 100 yards. Confident in his positioning and the bear's apparent focus on its meal, Mark began snapping photos. What he didn't realize, however, was that a subtle change in the wind had carried his scent directly toward the bear. The grizzly paused mid-bite, lifting its head and sniffing the air. Its ears pivoted forward, and its black eyes scanned the terrain. Mark continued to photograph, captivated by the bear's imposing stature and unaware of the growing tension in its movements. The bear took a few tentative steps away from the river, still testing the air. Then, as if something clicked in its primal instincts, it turned toward the ridge and moved deliberately in Mark's direction. Mark finally noticed the bear's behavior shift when it was halfway up the slope. Alarm bells rang in his mind, but he tried to stay calm. He knew that sudden movements could provoke a charge, and the ridge provided no immediate escape route. He grabbed his bear spray, his last line of defense, but the massive predator showed no signs of stopping. Within seconds, the slow approach turned into a full-speed charge. The grizzly moved with terrifying speed, closing the distance in an instant. Mark barely had time to react. He sprayed a burst of bear deterrent into the air, but the wind worked against him, dispersing it away from the bear. The grizzly was undeterred, its sheer bulk crashing through shrubs and loose rocks as it bore down on him. The bear struck Mark with a force that knocked him off his feet and sent his camera equipment flying. Its initial swipe shattered his arm, rendering him defenseless. Pain shot through his body as the bear's claws raked across his torso, tearing through flesh and muscle. Despite the agony, Mark's instincts as a photographer lingered. He thought fleetingly of the memory card in his camera, filled with images he would never get to share. The attack was brutal and unrelenting. The bear's immense strength and predatory instincts left no room for escape. It mauled Mark with primal fury, driven not by hunger but curiosity, territoriality, and perhaps an association of humans with food, a tragic consequence of illegal feeding incidents in the park. When the bear finally retreated, leaving Mark bloodied and motionless on the ridge, the surrounding wilderness fell eerily silent. His camera lay a few feet away, its lens cracked but still intact. The memory card within it would later reveal the final moments leading up to the attack, the bear's slow, calculated approach, and Mark's unwavering focus on his craft until it was too late. It wasn't until 2 days later that park rangers discovered Mark's body. A routine patrol team noticed signs of disturbance near the ridge, the trampled brush, the scattered equipment, and eventually, the grim evidence of the attack. They recovered his camera and reviewed the footage, piecing together the events that led to his tragic end. The incident sent shockwaves through the wildlife photography community and reignited debates about safety protocols in bear country. Experts speculated that the bear's aggressive behavior stemmed from its habituation to humans due to past feeding incidents. This association blurred the boundaries between humans and prey, creating a volatile situation that even the most experienced outdoorsman could not predict. Mark's death became a somber reminder of the risks inherent in capturing nature's untamed beauty. His photographs, later published posthumously, showcased the grizzly that took his life, a haunting testament to the fine line between awe and danger in the wild. Following the tragedy, the national park implemented stricter guidelines, including increased patrols to prevent illegal feeding and mandatory bear safety workshops for visitors. Mark's story became a cautionary tale for photographers and adventurers alike, emphasizing that no matter how skilled or prepared one might be, nature's unpredictability can never be fully tamed. In the end, Mark Evans left behind a legacy of stunning imagery and a powerful lesson. Respect the wild not as a conqueror but as a humbled observer, knowing that every step into its realm is both a privilege and a risk. Mount Elbrus is a majestic sentinel in the rugged Caucasus Mountains, its snow-clad peaks drawing adventurers worldwide. In July 2021, 4 climbers, Olga Kravtsova, Sergei Ivanov, and 2 companions, embarked on a mission to scale this formidable peak. Experienced mountaineers Olga and Sergei were no strangers to the challenges of high-altitude expeditions. To prepare for their ascent, the group spent their first night at a lower elevation to acclimatize. The weather was crisp, and the air was thin but manageable. At 5,642 meters, Mount Elbrus demanded respect, not just for its towering height, but for its concealed perils. Avalanches, frostbite, and sudden storms were common threats, yet none of these dangers matched the silent, primal threat prowling the area that night. Unbeknownst to the climbers, a Russian grizzly bear, famished from a brutal winter, was wandering near their camp. This bear, displaced by melting glaciers and dwindling prey in the valleys, had been driven to higher elevations in desperate search of food. That evening, the climbers shared a modest meal, laughing and discussing their strategy for the ascent. Exhaustion soon claimed them, and by midnight the camp was silent. Nestled in their sleeping bags, the climbers drifted into uneasy dreams, unaware that the delicate balance of their world was about to shatter. It began as a faint rustling, a sound so innocuous that it might have been dismissed as wind brushing against the tents. But within moments, the quiet gave way to chaos. A colossal shadow loomed, its massive frame blocking the moon's faint glow. The grizzly bear, driven by hunger and the scent of food, had found its way to the camp. The first tent was ripped open with a ferocity that defied comprehension. Olga Kravtsova barely had time to register what was happening before she was dragged from her sleeping bag. The bear's claws tore through the tent's fabric as though it were paper, its guttural growls piercing the night. Olga screamed a sound that jolted Sergei Ivanov awake in the neighboring tent. Without hesitation, Sergei grabbed his ice axe, the closest weapon. Rushing toward the horrific scene, he swung the axe with all his strength, striking the bear's shoulder. The beast roared in pain and fury, releasing Olga momentarily. Bloodied and disoriented, she tried to crawl away, but the bear's attention quickly refocused on her. Sergei, undeterred, struck again, this time aiming for the bear's head. The blow glanced off the thick bone of its skull, enraging the animal further. With a speed that belied its massive size, the bear turned on Sergei, swiping at him with a paw the size of a dinner plate. The impact sent him sprawling, his ribs cracking under the force. Olga, still alive but gravely injured, watched in terror as Sergei fought valiantly. He managed to land another blow with the axe, this time embedding it into the bear's side. The animal reared up on its hind legs, towering over Sergei, before crashing down upon him with devastating weight. The 2 remaining climbers, paralyzed with fear in their tent, realized the severity of the attack only when Sergei's cries abruptly ceased. They unzipped their tent cautiously, their breath catching as they saw the carnage illuminated by the pale moonlight. Olga lay motionless, her body a broken silhouette against the snow. The bear stood over Sergei, its fur matted with blood. Panic seized them. Abandoning their belongings, they bolted downhill, their footsteps pounding against the frozen ground. The bear, distracted by the remains of its victims, did not pursue. Their flight through the darkness was a desperate bid for survival. Slipping and stumbling, they pressed on until the faint lights of a rescue outpost appeared in the distance. Collapsing before the startled rescue team, they gasped out fragmented accounts of the attack. The rescuers, equipped with firearms, set out cautiously toward the camp. By the time they arrived, the bear had vanished into the wilderness, leaving behind a scene of unspeakable devastation. The deaths of Olga Kravtsova and Sergei Ivanov sent shockwaves through the mountaineering community. These were not inexperienced climbers. They were seasoned veterans who had faced the harshest conditions nature could offer. Yet, their skill and preparation had not been enough to save them from the relentless force of a starving predator. Autopsies confirmed the brutality of the attack. Olga had suffered multiple fractures and severe blood loss, while Sergei's injuries indicated a prolonged struggle. His ice axe, found embedded in the snow near his body, bore testament to his bravery in the face of overwhelming odds. The incident sparked widespread discussion about the growing risks of wildlife encounters at high altitudes. Experts pointed to climate change as a driving factor. As glaciers receded and prey became scarce in the valleys, bears and other predators were forced to adapt, venturing into territories traditionally considered safe for humans. The Russian authorities warned climbers to take additional precautions and avoid camping in areas frequented by wildlife. Conservationists, meanwhile, highlighted the tragedy's broader implications. The grizzly's desperate behavior was a symptom of a larger ecological crisis threatening the animals and the humans who ventured into their shrinking habitats. The names Olga Kravtsova and Sergei Ivanov now resonate as symbols of the allure and the peril of mountaineering. Their story, though tragic, serves as a stark reminder of the thin line separating adventure from disaster in the wilderness. Ultimately, the tragedy underscored a sobering truth. Nature is neither cruel nor kind. It simply exists, indifferent to the fates of those who dare to tread its path. Olga and Sergei's final climb was not a failure, but a testament to their courage and determination. They faced the mountain and all it brought with unyielding resolve, leaving behind a legacy that would endure among the heights they sought to conquer. The Yukon Territory in Canada is a land of untamed beauty, a wilderness stretching beyond the horizon, with snow-capped peaks that meet dense forests, and nature reigns supreme. In October 2021, hunters Greg Palmer, Mike Larson, and Terry Scott embarked on a mission to trap wolves in this remote, unforgiving terrain. The men were seasoned outdoorsmen, familiar with the challenges of navigating the wild. Their purpose was clear: to manage the wolf population, an effort often contentious, but deemed necessary by many to preserve ecological balance. The air was crisp that morning, and the frost crunched under their boots as they trekked to check their traps. Nestled at the edge of a vast forest, their camp was a hub for their activities. Days were spent setting traps, tracking wolf packs, and maintaining their equipment. Nights brought stories shared over a roaring fire, the glow of lanterns flickering against the darkness. The Yukon wilderness was beautiful but merciless, and missteps could be fatal. On this particular day, the men stumbled upon a trap that had been sprung. To their surprise, it was not a wolf they had captured, but a massive grizzly bear. The animal, a formidable presence even in its injured state, lay tangled in the steel jaws of the trap. Its growls echoed through the trees, a low, guttural sound that sent shivers down their spines. Grizzlies are apex predators, towering over humans at full height and armed with razor-sharp claws and powerful muscles. They are known for their unpredictable nature, and even an injured bear poses a grave threat. Greg, Mike, and Terry understood this too well, but assumed the bear was immobilized. The bear's movements appeared sluggish, and the trap effectively restrained it. They approached cautiously, their rifles ready, intending to assess the situation and determine their next steps. They did not account for the sheer power of adrenaline surging through the grizzly's veins. As the hunters approached, the bear's growls grew louder. Its eyes locked onto its captors with a primal intensity. The beast surged forward instantly, ripping free from the trap that had injured but not subdued it. The men had no time to react. The attack was swift and ferocious. The bear lunged at Greg first, its massive claws slicing through him with terrifying ease. Terry, standing closest to Greg, attempted to raise his rifle but was overtaken before he could pull the trigger. Both men were killed almost instantly, their bodies left motionless on the forest floor. Standing a few paces away, Mike froze in shock as the scene unfolded. The bear, now bloodied and enraged, turned its attention toward him. Instinct took over, and he ran, adrenaline propelling him through the dense forest. Behind him, he could hear the bear crashing through the undergrowth, its pursuit relentless. Somehow, he managed to outpace the animal, stumbling back to the safety of their cabin. Once inside, Mike barricaded the door, his heart pounding as he tried to process the horror he had just witnessed. The small wooden cabin offered little comfort. He knew the bear was still out there, and its aggression had reached a dangerous peak. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves outside. Unbeknownst to Mike, the grizzly was tracking his scent. Bears can detect prey from miles away with their keen sense of smell. The bloodshed earlier had only heightened the animal's fury, and it was determined to finish what it had started. Sometime after nightfall, the bear reached the cabin. Mike's worst fears were realized when he heard the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing outside the door. The beast began clawing at the walls, its strength threatening to tear the structure apart. Mike clutched his rifle, his hands trembling, but the thin wooden barriers of the cabin provided little defense against the bear's onslaught. The door gave way, and the grizzly charged inside. What followed was a desperate struggle for survival. Mike fired his rifle, the deafening sound echoing through the night, but the shots only seemed to enrage the animal further. The bear struck him with a force that sent him crashing against the wall. Despite his injuries, Mike fought back, using whatever he could to defend himself: a chair, a knife, even his bare hands. The struggle was brutal and chaotic, a testament to Mike's will to survive and the bear's unrelenting aggression. In the end, however, the grizzly overpowered him. When the beast finally retreated, Mike lay lifeless on the floor, the cabin a scene of destruction and carnage. The following morning, a group of campers passing through the area stumbled upon the aftermath. They found Greg and Terry's bodies near the trap and the ravaged cabin where Mike had made his last stand. Horrified, they alerted authorities, who arrived to assess the situation. Wildlife officers tracked the grizzly, eventually finding and euthanizing it. The bear's injuries from the trap undoubtedly contributed to its heightened aggression, a grim reminder of the risks of trapping large predators. The officers noted the bear's immense strength and resilience, even in its wounded state. The incident sent shockwaves through the hunting and wildlife management community. Ethical debates surrounding trapping practices were reignited, with critics arguing that such methods often lead to unintended and tragic consequences. Supporters of trapping emphasize the importance of predator control in maintaining ecological balance, but acknowledge the need for stricter guidelines to prevent incidents like this. The loss was immeasurable for the families of Greg, Terry, and Mike. The men had ventured into the wilderness to manage its predators, only to become victims of one. Their death served as a stark reminder of the inherent dangers of working in such an unforgiving environment. On a quiet June evening in 2020, three friends, Dan Mullins, Eric Carter, and Jeff Simmons, set out for a fishing trip along Bitterroot Creek in Idaho. The area was serene, a stretch of wilderness known for its beauty and abundance of trout. Towering pines lined the creek, their shadows stretching long as the sun dipped below the horizon. The friends, all experienced outdoors people, felt at ease in this rugged terrain. They had fished these waters many times before, sharing stories and laughter against the backdrop of nature's raw splendor. Yet, beneath the surface calm, there was an unsettling undercurrent. Eric had remarked earlier about the peculiar quietness of the forest. The usual chorus of birds and rustling underbrush seemed absent, replaced by an eerie stillness. While the three brushed it off as a trick of the mind, the feeling of being watched lingered like a shadow, growing heavier as the evening wore on. Unbeknownst to them, they were indeed being watched. From the dense tree line, a massive grizzly observed their every move. This bear wasn't an ordinary inhabitant of the forest. It was a rogue, an outlier in bear behavior, aggressive and territorial. Nearby, its den lay hidden, filled with animal remains that spoke of its violent dominance over this stretch of wilderness. The men were intruders to the grizzly, and the boundary they had unknowingly crossed was unforgivable. As dusk deepened into night, the friends prepared to pack up. The trout had been biting all day, and their coolers were nearly full. Eric decided to explore upstream for one last cast, leaving Dan and Jeff by the water's edge to secure their gear. The air was cooling rapidly, and the light was fading fast. Then, the silence broke, not with the gentle rustle of wind or the distant call of an owl, but with a sound that froze the blood in Dan and Jeff's veins. A low, guttural growl reverberated through the forest. Before they could react, The grizzly charged from the shadows, its massive frame moving with terrifying speed. Dan and Jeff had no time to run. The bear was on them in seconds, a blur of fur and fury. Its first swipe sent Jeff sprawling, his body slamming into the rocky creek bank. Dan turned to flee, but was brought down by a powerful lunge. The bear's jaws clamped around his leg, dragging him into the dirt. Eric, hearing the commotion, turned to see the chaos unfold. Without a second thought, he bolted upstream, his survival instincts overriding any urge to help. He later admitted the guilt of that decision would haunt him forever. The attack was brutal and unrelenting. Dan struggled fiercely, kicking and striking at the bear with everything he had. But his efforts were futile against the sheer power of the grizzly. Its claws tore through his clothing and flesh, and its teeth delivered crushing bites that left no chance of escape. Jeff, dazed and bleeding, tried to crawl away but drew the bear's attention once more. It turned on him, its growls echoing over the creek as it pounced. The force of its attack crushed his chest, silencing him instantly. The struggle lasted minutes, though it felt like an eternity. When the bear finally retreated, the clearing was silent, except for the creek's rushing water and the distant cry of a frightened Eric, still running. The grizzly, satisfied with its territorial fury, disappeared into the forest, leaving devastation in its wake. Authorities were alerted when Eric stumbled into a nearby campsite, hysterical and covered in scratches from his flight through the brush. Search and rescue teams arrived at the creek the next morning, finding the scene exactly as Eric described. Dan and Jeff's bodies bore the unmistakable signs of a grizzly attack: deep claw marks, broken bones, and evidence of a fierce struggle. Nearby, a trail of flattened grass and disturbed earth led to a den tucked into the hillside. Inside the den, investigators found a chilling sight: a cache of animal remains, some recent, others reduced to bones. This wasn't a bear defending its home, it was a predator asserting dominance over its territory, a behavior that had grown increasingly common in the area. The attack on Dan and Jeff marked the fifth fatal bear encounter in the region that summer, a grim statistic that fueled fear and outrage among locals. News of the attack spread quickly, sparking debates about the delicate balance between humans and wildlife. Bitterroot Creek, once a popular recreation spot, symbolized danger. Many questioned why the grizzly population in the area had grown so aggressive. Wildlife experts pointed to a combination of shrinking habitats, reduced food sources, and increased human encroachment. Others argued that the bears had become bolder after years of limited hunting regulations and minimal human intervention. A massive search was launched to locate the rogue bear. Helicopters scoured the forest, and armed rangers patrolled the area, determined to prevent another tragedy. Traps baited with fresh meat were set along the creek and nearby valleys, but the bear proved elusive. Weeks turned into months, and the grizzly remained large, a ghost in the wilderness that kept the region on edge. For Eric, life would never be the same. Survivors of such attacks often carry physical and emotional scars that never fully heal. He rarely spoke of that night, the memories too painful to relive. Friends and family noticed his change. A once outgoing and adventurous man, now reserved and haunted. His survival felt like a cruel twist of fate, a burden he would carry for the rest of his life. The attack at Bitterroot Creek became a cautionary tale, a reminder of nature's unpredictability and the fine line between coexistence and conflict. Some locals stopped venturing into the woods, while others armed themselves, refusing to be caught off guard. Conservationists urged education and respect for wildlife, emphasizing that bears, though fearsome, are vital to the ecosystem. Yet the fear lingered, a shadow over the community. Years later, Bitterroot Creek remains a place of beauty and danger. The forest has reclaimed the site of the attack, and the grizzly, whether dead or still roaming, is a part of its story. For those who dare to visit, the lesson is clear. The wilderness is not ours to tame, and respect for its power is the price of entry. Dan and Jeff paid that price with their lives, a tragic reminder of what happens when the wild asserts itself against man's encroachment.